A lot of people want to be an entrepreneur before they really know what problems they are going to solve. But what I see there a lot of is this weird mismatch where you've got like people that they want to do something, but there's no demand for it because they don't understand how the education system works. So most people who have ever tried to get rich in education as opposed to do something to improve education focus in on like, how can I replace teachers? Which is why you're seeing already like a ton of garbage AI.
Yeah.
EdTech. The world is full of that. That person, they've probably never been a teacher and they're just solving the wrong problem. So I just see a lot of like problem market, mismatch in education and endless piles of people doing something that I don't think would work even if they probably do.
So hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Changing Reality. We have an exciting conversation ahead. We're here talking to Jack, the VP of People at Roblox. How are you feeling today? How's it going?
Feel great. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you in person. I feel like,
I know.
Like out of curiosity, since, Roblox is a company, very online, do you have all your meetings in the game itself?
I don't. There was a time there that I would have a few a week. We have an internal Roblox office experience
on the game.
In the game, and I used to meet with my boss occasionally there, probably about once a week, and I would always meet with my lead game designer in that space. We don't use it that much anymore. We do a lot of other things though on the platform internally. We have so if you like apply for a job at Roblox in software engineering or product development. Not only do you take assessments that we build, which are on Roblox, game-based assessment, but we also have like an early career center where you can go and learn about Roblox on Roblox. And
wow, okay.
And we're building out our orientation, basically our new hire orientation on Roblox, and some other training. And so there's a lot in the company you can do on the platform.
It's actually a little offensive how fun you've made it. Like. Honestly, like normally that onboarding is the most boring part of like a new job, but it's on Roblox. Like I'm offended on behalf of every company that has ever existed.
It's actually kind of embarrassing. I can't remember the company. It might have been Pepsi. During the pandemic, somebody else put their orientation on Roblox before we did. Now they were a lot bigger, but when I saw that, I was like, all right, we can't not do this if someone else is having their new employees meet for the first time on our platform.
Okay, that is amazing. You should kind of get back at them, buy out all the Pepsi, serve it at your
Ours
orientation.
Is better, I'm sure.
Yeah, like what could they do? They just use the product. You actually do the magic.
But we're really, honestly, it's obviously Roblox is free to play. It's free to build and develop and create. So if a company wants to do whatever they want on the platform, that's great. We're happy to help them, honestly.
And there is so much to talk about, in terms of what you're doing right now in game-based assessments, how you're leveraging Roblox. But before we get into all of that, I am super curious about how you got to your role today. You have a very interesting background, I think, that intersects government and policy to education to tech. So for our audience who maybe, are dreaming of careers in tech, I'm sure you have a very straightforward, simple journey to share with them immediately of how, you got to where you are today.
I got here very much by accident, honestly. I did not expect either to be in tech at this stage in my career or in HR and related functions. I started actually as a nuclear reactor engineer in the Navy.
The natural Navy. Career path for all
natural
tech.
Path. They paid for college and I had to pay them back for 5 years. And when I got out of that, I went to grad school. But if you'd asked me what I wanted to do, I wanted to be one of those professors you've probably met who come in and out of government and academia, probably national security, right? When their party's in power, I come in and work in the Pentagon. And when we lose, you go back to academia. That was sort of my model. Didn't happen. I ended up specializing in applied statistics, but working in education policy. And I did come in and out of government and academia. I was a professor at Boston College and NYU. But I ran an agency for President Obama and worked in other parts of government, just not in military defense stuff. And so I did that for a while, and then ended up in sort of large nonprofits and doing work either for the government, or I also helped redesign the SAT and worked in research and psychometrics, so all the measurement and statistics for testing. So testing and measurement has really been probably my focal area through all these things.
And an extremely fun part, the best part of education, testing.
Hey, it's important. Not everybody loves every test, but that's one of the reasons that I kind of got sucked into game-based assessment, is trying to take something that we have to do for a lot of reasons and make it more engaging and hopefully better in other technical ways. So measuring hard to measure things and doing it in a way that keeps people more engaged.
So first of all, that itself is an insane story. Thank you for insane in the greatest way possible, I will say. But, out of curiosity, game-based learning is something that it sounds like a dream come true, like a dream to reality for a lot of, students that I personally know. And at the same time, when you think about it more and more, it makes more sense, because when you interact with interface, when you interact with games, you're using kind of all parts of your brain. You can't just, memorize something and vomit it out. You have to be more dynamic in thinking. So it's definitely where the future is headed in terms of assessment. How has it been that you are at the forefront of this innovation, and how do you kind of stumble into that?
So again, somewhat by accident, I had, so as part of that other career path, I worked with a lot of international assessments. So if you ever read a newspaper article that talks about the U.S. is, 6th place in reading and math for 15-year-olds or something like that, I worked on sort of all those different indicators that are from programs, both for the U.S. and also internationally. And one of the people who runs those, one of the entities that runs that assessment program, is the OECD. They're a quasi-governmental sort of nonprofit based in Paris that came out of the end of World War II. And they asked me to help write a white paper on how to measure creative problem solving and creative thinking for high school kids, for 15-year-olds. And so we worked on that. It was really fun. And then they asked my team at the time to bid on it. And I told them, I don't have the people. It's got to be a game. I think this is what I do, but I don't have the game developers. I don't have the engineers. I don't have the staff in my current organization. And then I met this startup, this brilliant young woman who had created this company called Embellis. And they were trying to do game-based assessment. And actually, it's a funny story. They kept trying to, a mutual friend kept trying to schedule a meeting, and I looked her up online, and I'm like, gosh, she's sort of saying all these crazy things. She doesn't know anything about testing. I don't have time for this. And he's like, no, you really got to meet her. She's really great. And so I finally did, and we had this fantastic conversation, and I realized, if I had known this company existed, I might have bid on this game. Mm-hmm. And so I went out to California and spent a couple of days with the whole team just to get to know, are they for real? Mm-hmm. At the startup, and you know what, they are. So I decided I would do some partnership with them, but then somebody I knew on their board essentially offered me to be the president and chief scientist and come in and try to make these games for real. So couldn't pass that opportunity up. So I sort of jumped out of large nonprofit life and wanted to do the startup thing a little later than most people. And McKinsey was our biggest client. If any of your listeners go on to business school and then apply to be a business analyst at McKinsey, which a lot of Ivy League folks students do, they will have to take a game that probably a new variant, but originally it was our team that built the McKinsey selection games. And then when we sold the company, we ended up sending a team and a license to keep doing that to McKinsey. I still have friends there that build their assessments. But we met Roblox sort of at the very end of things when we were looking to sell the company, and they bought us to do the same thing. And so I ended up making game-based assessments for hiring software engineers and product managers and data scientists and other folks at Roblox, which is a little bit different than, game-based learning is a huge topic. Game-based assessment is a little smaller topic inside. Obviously, you have to measure things when you're learning. And then we have the hardest little corner, which is like high-stakes game-based assessment for selection. Like if you don't do well on our games, you don't get hired, which is the hard. It's much more fun to build game-based learning, which we also do internally. So we've been building, more and more of our corporate L&D is actually on the platform. But we started really on the hardest end of the problem.
First of all, there's so much. I have so many questions. There's so much to unpack. It's amazing. And first, I just can't believe that every single person that I interact has probably either known Roblox or is hoping for a McKinsey internship so that they can play the assessment that you guys have built. So you've conquered every friend that I have, no matter how old they are. Terrifying.
I was going to say the McKinsey thing was really interesting. So for many, many years, they had a pencil and paper test that they called the problem solving test, or the PST. You can find like Google, find practice tests online. So they wanted us to sort of replace the PST. They already had assessment, but they wanted to make it more engaging. And I find generally there's sort of two reasons why people want to do game-based assessment. They either want to measure old things in new ways that are more fun, and that's a little bit of what they wanted. Or to something you said earlier, they want to measure new things or things that were really hard to measure in traditional ways. So things like creative thinking. In our case at Roblox, creative problem solving and systems thinking are the major domains right now. We're working on computational thinking, which is interesting. So it's a little bit, in the McKinsey case, it was a little bit of both. They had an old test they wanted to refresh and make more fun. Fun.
As fun.
Yeah, small values of fun. But they also wanted to maybe measure some new things, to look at problem solving a little differently as a construct.
So for our audience here, who maybe this is the first time they're hearing the concept, how does game-based assessments differ from traditional assessments in the way that they're set up and also in the way of the methods and things that they track?
So, they can measure the same things in the sense of you could hire me to make an algebra test, and it could be a pencil and paper or a simple computer test. The fundamental unit of an assessment and of a traditional assessment is usually what we call like an item, right? It's like a question, right? X plus 5 equals what? Either fill in the blank or type in the answer. It depends on the mode. But an item is sort of the core. In a game-based assessment, there's items or item scores are hiding in there too, but they're not always as obvious, right? It may not be go solve this problem and answer it. It may be we observe your interactions with the UI, with the user interface, and that generates a whole ton of data, right? Everything, every mouse move, every thing you click on, the time it takes between things generates a giant stream of data that we call telemetry data, just like in other applications. We build the items out of the telemetry data. So essentially we watch what you do and we use that to infer what you think.
No, and that's how you can kind of, track all of the softer skills that, aren't your math and science knowledge.
Yeah, in theory, I mean, honestly, given enough time and money, you can make a game-based assessment of anything or a pencil and paper assessment of almost anything. It just may be really tedious, right? Like systems thinking is a great example. In our systems thinking assessment, it's really hard. It would be feasible to do it on pencil and paper, but it would take forever to set it up. It would take you forever to do it. It would be hard to score and hard to watch. Whereas if you do it in a game, it doesn't feel as painful for you, and it's much easier for us too. So it's very rarely is there something that's like impossible to do in one mode. But definitely games make some things a lot easier and most things more fun.
I completely agree. And why do you think that companies are naturally shifting towards game-based assessment? Because it will take, a bit more of a setup cost, a bit more of infrastructure versus the traditional paper and pen. And as much as I think fun is the driver for everything in life, maybe companies have a different point of view.
I mean, it's a great question. One of the things I mentioned I worked on when we were talking earlier is the redesign of the SAT and all the advanced placement courses. In fact, I visited Penn multiple times, both to talk about the new SAT, it was new back then, back in like 2014, but also to meet with faculty to talk about advanced placement and try to do local validity studies about the predictive power of advanced placement on Penn's campus. I actually still go visit a friend and teach a guest lecture at Penn once a year.
Well, you have to tell us next time so we can
school,
sneak in. This is on camera, so now.
I'm sure Professor Zimmerman would let you in. We in those cases, in those education contexts, I mean, you're kind of a captive audience, right? You want to go to college or you want to get credit for this course, you're going to take the test. Maybe there's 2 tests and you can pick one, but they're both equally painful. It's not a lot of great options. In the workplace, unless you are the absolute number one most popular employer for new engineers or whatever we're looking at, and almost nobody is. I mean, somebody's number one every year, but nobody is such the perfect employer that candidates don't look at least a couple other places. The assessment can't necessarily be so tedious, or you might just leave, right? If you imagine you're like, well, I don't know, Roblox looks like fun, but I'd really rather work at, Google or Databricks, and Roblox is my number 3. Well, if I want to attract you as a candidate and we're not your top choice, I need to make the experience fun, or you'll just give up on us. And so part of it for Roblox was trying to make what is a kind of frightening and tedious process a little more fun. And of course, because we're a game platform company, it feels very natural for us. Whereas if somebody else moves to a purely game-based assessment, it might scare away some of their candidates. Actually, on that note, I should say not everyone, of course, who applies to Roblox is a gamer or even knows very much about Roblox. And we don't want to lose those people either, because they may be fantastic engineers or product managers or whatnot. And so we have a free and publicly available practice test. It's in our candidate experience center. So you can just go to this Roblox place and learn about the company, and then you can go in this room in there and play like a practice version of what one of our game-based assessments would feel like. And we did that explicitly to reduce test anxiety, right? A lot of people are really anxious about any kind of testing.
I'm surrounded by college students all the time.
You may have heard of this.
I'm familiar with the concept, yeah.
And we did, some internal studies and found it does reduce anxiety, particularly among people that are less comfortable in gaming, of course. So really happy that it's also put, I can send you a link, and
no, I was just
your
going to say,
listeners can go and you can go play it right now.
Yeah,
I could pull out my phone and show it to you. But.
It makes me wonder, like you mentioned earlier, other companies as well, Roblox is a free platform. People can build what they want, and they can build, their own onboarding, their own simulations. And essentially it's a free world online that they can create in the image of, whatever their needs are. And that is absolutely fascinating. And we always talk about it in the context of kids. And I joke that, if it ever goes down, children around the world will revolt.
Outages are, big deal. Big deal at home.
But it's loved by children. But at the same time, it's such a powerful tool for companies. So for companies who want to incorporate more game-based learning or game-based assessments in their organizations, how can Roblox be their start? Where can they what can they do first? So
I certainly see a lot more companies that start in a different place. They start more with like brand experience games, right? So the yoga people, for example, just one coming to mind, right? They have a fantastic experience that you go in, you learn all these yoga poses. You can actually learn about the company
on Roblox.
On Roblox. And we have a lot of other sort of, these big partnerships. In some cases, obviously we'll help anybody that asks for help, but sometimes they just do it. They hire independent game studios. So one path into this is to work, if you don't have a game studio in-house, but you want to do something like this, we're happy to help you meet somebody that knows how to build on Roblox. There's a lot of community developers out there that love to help with this. Assessment is a little extra, right? So it's one thing to build like the NFL has always, every Super Bowl has a huge Super Bowl experience, but that's not assessing you. In those cases, what we've done in the past is like we will work with like learning scientists or IO psychologists at the organization if they really want to go down this route. It's been pretty interesting. We had a grant program for a couple of years where we gave money to nonprofits in education. So usually people who had a curriculum they wanted to turn into a game, but they didn't know how to do it. So the Boston Museum of Science is a great example. We gave them a grant, and then we helped work with them to build, it's called Mission to Mars. It teaches kids about some of the engineering design principles in the next generation science standards. And so my team was able to work with them and say, like, here's what we would recommend to build a game-based assessment within Roblox, and here's how we think about it, and here's how you might do it. So we've got a bunch of examples like that. If a company just wanted to go and do it, they'd probably have to hire their own assessment team.
I can imagine.
And there's easier things to do in life than try to build an assessment.
Roblox
of course,
is tough, okay? Not all of
no.
us.
I mean, the building the experience is easy. The making an assessment that's scientifically valid and reliable is not amateur hour. So
I would argue that some paper and pencil assessments don't even meet that metric. So you have a policy background, you have an education background. If you had to summarize in like 3 points, what are the 3 things that people need to be thinking about when they're creating assessments, particularly game-based assessments, for them to be effective?
Well, here's one that they're probably not thinking about, but if you're going to use an assessment for anything important, like selecting for a job or assigning a grade to people in the class, it has to be accessible to everybody, right? You can't, especially if you're working in an institution like a school system, you can't just, oh, this kid has a hearing impairment and my game has audio in it. Oh, well, too bad. And so assessment makers, in our case, if we want to hire somebody and they're visually impaired, I have to provide an alternative, right? And so you end up spending a lot of time, even for something that you might only do a couple times a year, but you have to have sort of a valid alternative assessment for anybody, by law who might want to work with you. Yeah. I found so I talked to a lot of assessment startups, of course, right? And advisory stuff, or just like always happy to do a call. And that's one of the questions I usually ask if they thought about that, to give me a sense of how far along they really are in thinking about this stuff. Because if you spend a few years trying to build something and you haven't thought about what are you going to do for people that, it's one thing if it's just entertainment, but if this thing is you're going to sell this to customers and then the customers have to use it on the general population, you need to think about things like that. That's one. I mean, the second really is more general around, as I mentioned, the scientific criteria, right? Assessment can be fun, but it has to be valid and reliable. And so that's a whole giant topic right there of all the things you do from the beginning to the end. And so sort of a never-ending process to try to make sure that the tests you're making are doing what you say they do. And so that's a thing that people, if you've only ever built like a consumer product, you can throw that over the wall and they like it or they don't. If they buy it, that's success, right?
Yeah.
An assessment may look great and feel great and people want to do it, and then you get the data back and it doesn't work. And so it's in some ways it's more like health tech, right? Or
it's more scientifically driven versus marketing driven.
And so that's like the second trap, more common trap, is forgetting about the science piece of it. Now, there are a bunch of assessment companies out there, and there are a lot of other people who get this. I think it's but if you're absolutely new to it, I do run into people who just they hate some test they took and they have an idea. And it's a good idea, but I'm like, there's a lot of things you have to do in the middle. I guess the last one, because you asked for 3, it's around the content, right? What are you measuring? Sometimes we call the constructs. You have to do a bunch of work there too. So I've seen people get in trouble, for example, like what they used to call IQ, which probably I would call something more like general fluid intelligence, and I would argue it's a thing, although someone listening will tell me it's not a thing, and we could have an argument for an hour.
But that's what the comments are for.
But let's do that in the comments. So let's assume for a second, give me a benefit of the doubt that general fluid intelligence is a thing. I can't not offer you a job on the basis of a general intelligence test. That's illegal in the United States right now. What I have to do is I have to demonstrate that the things I'm testing you on are actually necessary for success in the role you're about to go do. And so for us, the first step of building an assessment for somebody like a software engineer is not, let me think of a really hard thing, right? It's, let me study software engineers and see what kinds of knowledge, skills, and abilities they have to have. And then look at the things what level do they need to have on these things? And then build a test that measures those things. And if you skip that first step, you might make a test that selects people, but not on something that you can justifiably say matters. And again, if you're a testing person, that's like obvious. But if you come at this from another space, you might just think, here's a test that only smart people can pass, whatever that means, right? Smart people. So let's just make it hard, right? And do this. So let's make them do calculus, and then I'll give them a job. And if they don't have to do calculus at work, that's not okay.
I've not seen many jobs that need calculus. Actually, There are some.
There's
but
some.
yeah, I mean,
Finance.
you have that nuclear background. I should not be saying that in front of you, but
I'm sure you've got some finance listeners who are going to
I have many who
do pricing.
who will let me know in
calculus.
the comments and be like, Harsha, we do use calculus. that will be the thing.
Many more people
away.
don't. Right.
Yeah, but like I really appreciate you sharing that, because especially like, again, as someone who runs a startup in education, I think sometimes we always run head into things because it's fun and cool and like we know it can be effective. But honestly, maybe it's the young entrepreneur in me who does not think things through. So I think like that is helpful context for me, at least, when I'm like thinking about how we can do things better. And on that note, I'd love to talk a little bit about, your advice generally for young people who are getting into the entrepreneurship space, specifically in the education space, the edtech space. What are some of the things that, like I loved how earlier you mentioned when you first met the founder of, the startup that would be acquired by Roblox and would be integrated into them. You were like, oh, does she know what she's saying and all of that? What do you think founders can do to really understand the subject matter that they're trying to understand in such a saturated market of education where everyone seems to have an opinion because everyone went to school? How do we make sure? Yeah, I'm sorry, it's true.
It's so true.
But like, how do we make sure that
true.
our opinion is rooted in reality and not just our own experiences?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about education technology in particular because I've worked around this space for a long time, not just assessment. So one of the problems I find, one of the good things about education technology, let me start positive.
Yay.
You find a lot of passionate people who actually care about kids and making the world better, as opposed to, if you just hang around people doing crypto to try to make, make Andreessen Horowitz rich. That's not very much fun. And so the passion is great. And you find, particularly, they may have experience in schools, or working in other parts of education, and then they decide to go into the space. So the mission orientation is maybe one of the most fun parts. Probably the challenge is, I guess, and this is true in every area, not just ed, is a lot of people want to be an entrepreneur before they really know what problems they are going to solve, and I get that works. And the thing is, like, I say this obviously wearing the hat of an old guy that's done a lot of things. Experience eventually adds up even when you're not looking. And I find a lot more successful entrepreneurs, at least if it's not the founder or a co-founder, somebody on the team is somebody who's worked in that space long enough to actually know what people have tried before and hasn't worked, and what real problems are out there that you could solve. And so the biggest mismatch I see in a lot of ed tech, so for example, next weekend starts the big ed tech conference out west in San Diego, the ASU GSV.
Yeah, I get the emails.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'll be there this year. I used to go very regularly. I've skipped a few. But what I see there a lot of is this weird mismatch where you've got like people that they want to do something, but there's no demand for it because they don't understand how the education system works. And all they think is like, if you look at the money in education, for example, and now I'm just talking about K-12 or P-12 education, it's all labor. But I mean, add up what gets spent, right? In the sector, it's mostly teacher labor. And so most people who have ever tried to get rich in education as opposed to do something to improve education focus in on like, how can I replace teachers? Which is why you're seeing already like a ton of garbage AI ed tech. Like, let me take this commercial, large language model, graft something onto it, say I can replace teachers, and then sell it. And the world is full of that. That person, they've probably never been a teacher. They probably don't even know how the model they're reselling works, right? Maybe they do if it's a good tech team. And they're just solving the wrong problem. So I just see a lot of like problem market fit, mismatch in education. And endless piles of people doing something that I don't think would work even if they knew how to do it.
Even if they knew how to do it.
That sounds a little negative.
No, I see that.
So for me, it's like finding the people that have identified a real problem that they can really make traction on, and not just like, wouldn't it be cool if we replace teachers with X? And X changes every year, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it was film strips and like cassette tapes, and then the television, and then the internet. Now it's, large language models. Next year it'll be something else, right? But it's like, actually, no, you probably aren't going to replace teachers. Do you understand what a teacher's day is like and what tools they might need to be more effective? Like, can we start with a real problem that's in the system?
I think the only job that's less replaceable than teacher is probably parent. So like if you figure out that code,
Parents
like
are, that would be tricky.
yeah, exactly, right? It's like the teacher does so much more than just, deliver content that.
Well, I agree. It's funny you say that because what often happens, especially I see in educational entrepreneurs, they start trying to take on schools and they realize, especially in this country, but also in Europe and elsewhere, selling to institutional, big, complicated bureaucracies is a terrible sales cycle. It's really hard. And so they give up and they decide to sell direct to parents because it's like, well, parents have a stake in this. They're obviously they care about education. And so you see people that had an ambitious idea that then turns into like basically quiz software for parents, right? Or some kind of drilling or AI tutoring or whatever the flavor of the week is. And some of those are okay, but we've had most of that technology forever, right? It's not real new. You're probably not solving a real parent's problem.
Yeah.
That's where you work.
Very true. And as we start to wind down, I'm curious for all of the people right now, maybe they're not entrepreneurs yet, but they're very fascinated by this intersection of education and game-based learning and assessment. What can they do to kind of again get more experience and to kind of get more into the field?
I mean, I've always given the same advice to young people, both as a professor and as a mentor at work. You should read everything at work. Whatever your job is or whatever your area you're in. Like it's impossible to read too much about how it works, right? About if it's your own product and its specifications, or if it's something scientific, some aspect of the thing. Don't be like, oh, I'll hire somebody else to do that. You need to know as much as you can about all those details. It's always rewarded. I've never seen anybody that regretted understanding the details of something. But I've seen plenty of people who regret not understanding what they're really working on. And so I know that's very generic and probably sounds like it's every professor's advice, but I mean, not just do the reading in your class. Find the things that the key things you need to read, which may mean you have to talk to people. Like talk to somebody who's an expert or at least a few, steps ahead of you on the path and be like, hey, what did you read that really unlocked this for you? And then they may give you something that may work for you too, it may not, but not just like what did somebody assign me or what's everybody reading in some article that everybody in the paper's talking about or said, but like, what's the thing that actually helped somebody on that path? I think again, you can't do too much of that.
Well, in that case, on that note, I'll modify my last question a little bit.
Okay.
And what was one thing that you read or experienced or had a conversation on that shaped the way that you think about the work you do right now?
It's probably related to what I just said, not surprisingly. It's less about a particular thing I read, but it was more about a way that I was forced to work, which was in the Navy when I started. So in the nuclear Navy program, they make you memorize everything. So at one point, and I could never do this. I don't even think I could, if I did nothing else for the next year, I probably couldn't do this again. My brain's not there anymore, but like I could draw every aspect of the nuclear plants that I was working on, every valve, every line, every circuit, right? So they made you learn everything. And then though, when you had to operate it, you still had to pull out all the manuals and the checklists, because even if you knew everything, you still could mess it up, right? So it was sort of like a combination of read absolutely everything, memorize it, master it, but then never trust yourself because you could screw something up. So also build a system around that to make sure you don't make mistakes. And I guess I took that to heart, in my 20s, and I've built teams around those same ideas ever since, right? I make people know the details, usually by showing them that I'm in those details. Like, I'm going to ask you questions until you can't answer the questions, and then you're going to come back next week and be able to answer the next level of questions until they know that that's what I expect. But then we're not going to rely on that. We're going to actually go and make sure we check things, and we use tools to make sure we don't make mistakes. So
Well, I'm really curious if you ever do a guest lecture. Like, I will show up just to get the
I would say
interrogation.
the one I do every year is actually on or used to be on the federal role in education policy in the United States,
Ooh.
which may not be one next year. I don't know. So it's changing a lot. I can't use my old slides and notes. I'll put it that way.
We live in interesting times.
You
But
do.
of all of that, I think you definitely have had an interesting story, and I have no doubt that will continue to be at the forefront of, all of these exciting changes that's happening in the ed tech landscape.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for spending, some time with us and
Thanks for
talking
listening.
about it.
Thanks for the time.
And to our audience, I hope you had as much fun as I did asking the questions and listening. This has been Changing Reality once again. See you guys next week.